All right, excellent. We are just hitting up live here. Gonna get everybody rolled out, shared out, and then we'll go ahead and get started here. About 33 seconds from the rollout of the pen. Thanks for joining us today. Let's see if we can get a organized here. Looking good. Stream is strong. Recording's on. Everything looks good there. Okay. Go. Whoa, that's too fast. Back. Excellent. All right. So we should be good to go. Let's make sure we're streaming here and we'll get started. Looking good though. Steady 1.8 watts per kilogram. We're looking at just over 1.9. Let me back this off just a tad more. Be right on pace with us. Down to the riders here. Excellent. All right, we're rolled out. We're all grouped up. Be able to get started here. There we go. Let's move over to our slides. Welcome, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and thank you for joining us here in the feed zone. This show's typically on at 5:45 Pacific, 8:45 Eastern, and 13:45 GMT. Hopefully you're finding us here on Swift Live by ODZ or one of our other channels. We're also available on Twitch, Mixer, YouTube, and now we are available actually on your favorite podcast app. Just make sure you go to your favorite podcast app, search The Endurance Lab, and you'll actually be able to find all of our great content, What's Up with Power, Chat and Chill, Skills and Drills, and myself within the feed zone, as well as Coach's Corner in the Endurance Lab podcast. So check out those channels. Definitely enjoy that content as well. So we've got a really interesting topic today. We're going to be talking about essentially a guide to weight loss during this base training season or session or block per se here. But we'll go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and do some intros. My name is Jason Flores. I go by JFlo here in the game, Coach Flo if you like. One of the coaches here in the Endurance Lab. Definitely enjoying our time there. If you haven't checked out the Endurance Lab, check out endurancelab.fit. Definitely a good place to get some information about what the Endurance Lab is all about, and if you have a chance to join, or if you're in the lab now, some really great rides and information there. A quick medical disclaimer before we get started that the only purpose of this live stream is to educate, to inform, and is not a substitute for a medical professional. It's not on the understanding that does not constitute medical or other professional advice or service. So some of the goals of the live stream today are actually kind of twofold. One is to present articles in a popular media covering food and hydration and how it relates to endurance sports, and also to just open up a dialogue for viewers to ask questions and talk about their experiences with these sort of things. Have a back and forth. You're able to interact here on Swift Live by ODZ for the channel to find out, ask questions, or just to watch the presentation as we go. So let's get down to the nitty gritty. Our article today is actually brought to us by Training Peaks, one of our partners here on What's Up with Power, as well as in the feed zone. And we're going to be talking about your 14-step guide to weight loss during the base training season, and kind of how you can put things together that will allow you to reach your goals that you are looking to reach during this off season. A lot of times during the season, we'll find ourselves struggling to kind of meet those goals as far as how much weight we want to lose, or if we want to lose anything at all. I think really importantly, we need to make sure that we do that in the right time of the year. And this is the time where you could really focus on that weight loss. So with that, let's go ahead and switch over here. Good there. Get to that play. So We've got a couple topics that we'll be hitting up today. Specifically, we'll be talking about how it's really about the food that we're putting in that's going to be important. And then some questions or some answers, actually, of when you should ramp up your weight loss training or your goals. And then lastly there, how to steps for your practical weight loss. And then a way to kind of put a quantitative measure on how you can make the changes happen during this 6 or 12-week period, depending on what you have going on during that time, to see if we can make those changes. And then we'll throw in some additional tips and tricks on just how to stay on target so that we can reach our goals over time. All right. I'm going to quickly check in on our live stream, make sure that everything is going well there, and it looks like we are. If you see the riders here on the bottom right, it's actually in a program called Zwift. If you haven't checked out Zwift, check out Zwift at Zwift.com, and you'll be able to actually ride your trainer on the courses that you see here with a group. You could do it interactively with those other riders. You'll be able to chat with them as well. So definitely a great way to interact and get that ride indoors and make that enjoyable. So looks like things are moving along well here on the live stream. We've got viewers there on that end. We're just trying to get it streaming so that we can see it. But it is looking good from what I can tell. There we go. Keeps dropping. So we'll go ahead and move forward here. So your fastest self, so think about the whole race season as a whole and kind of where you left off and kind of, did you meet your goals that you had, that you wanted to reach as far as your, of course, your endurance goals, along with your weight goals? Because a lot of times, power to weight is everything. And trying to make sure you reach those goals is super important as far as, really pushing yourself that limit. So, but really the key is that you want to combine being light and lean with being strong and healthy, because so many times we find riders really starving themselves and they're not able to get the most that they can out of their workout. So to get this optimal performance, these things need to actually work together to allow us to make sure that you're not underfueling, and making sure you're getting the things that you need to recover and to perform. Because the fastest route to overtraining and is not making sure that you get enough food in and enough recovery, essentially. And so with that, we want to make sure that we have a plan. And so with the off season, just like we do during the on season, we want to make sure that we understand what we're trying to do and what are the goals we're trying to meet. So this brings us to our first topics, which is it's all about the food. And so for endurance athletes, we're a lot of time trying to lose weight, trying to reach that goal, that next notch on the belt. Nutrition plays a much more role, actually a higher role than even the exercise, meaning what you eat off the bike makes a huge difference versus what we are doing on the bike as far as your goals and your weight. So on the bike, we can do our focused exercises and we're able to get the fitness that we want, but in fact, off the bike, that's where you can really get the scale to move the direction that you want it to move in that sense. So things to remember to understand is that fat loss essentially that's the part that we want to lose. It takes time. So burning calories and eating more calories is kind of a very fine balance. And so doing the cycling and burning those calories and then essentially overfueling and overcompensating doesn't ever end up, no one ever ends up winning in that respect. So it doesn't end up resulting in fat loss. So essentially it is all about that food, because fat loss does take time, and your goal should be essentially fat loss, which means patience is required and it's a change over time. So not being too aggressive with your calorie deficit goals can be very useful. So really just aiming for a mild calorie deficit, anywhere from 300 to 500 calorie deficit per day, especially if you're still doing strength workouts, focused workouts on the bike, strength workouts on the bike, still getting those in. You can't go too much of a deficit because it's really going to affect your workout and that sort of thing. So starving yourself with too few calories can essentially make your body turn off and you'll go into starvation mode where the body will just hold on to everything. You're riding, you're working out, you're limiting all the foods, and you're not reaching your goals. You're not able to make it so that you're losing any weight or making any budges on the scales of the fat scale, the weight scale, whatever scale you're using. And we'll talk about that as we move forward. It essentially shuts down both the fitness development, because it locks down the fat stores, because it thinks that, hey, we're in a situation where there may not be food around because of the low caloric intake that I'm taking. So I'm going to shut everything down and make sure that we're not dumping into those stores. We're using other stores of food or calories in order to get ourselves to be get fueled for our workouts. So very important. So under extreme underfueling, you can definitely sabotage your training. And it could lead to all other kinds of problems out there, essentially hormone problems, imbalances in that respect, bone loss, also immunosuppression, meaning that you'll get sick more frequently. So all of these things definitely play a role in this sort of thing. So definitely need to be very careful with that as you do decrease your calorie deficit and you get really deep into the hole. Very, very important. All right. So when should you ramp up your weight loss? The question becomes, during this off season or this lower intensity season, we have a little bit more time to focus during this base period. So this is a good time for us to focus on this sort of thing. So you don't want to wait till you're 8 weeks away from your peak race and just assume that the weight will just, melt off because of all the intensity that you're doing. The problem with that is that with intensity, you need to make sure that you are also fueling for those rides and workouts. So really, it's a balance. We're trying to stay balanced and neutral during that time versus trying to move into a deficit during that time. So only the lucky genetic riders that can drop that high amount of calories right at the end is where you'll find that happening. But for the rest of us, we need to take a detailed plan to achieve this optimal race weight really early on. So let's move into some practical steps for weight loss during this off season, because we've got more time. We're doing things that require less intensity. We're doing things that we've got a little bit more of a longer period of time in between rides sometimes. So those are all things that could be very, 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 very useful in that respect. So with that, you could follow this following list of actions, just one by one, and you'll find yourself slowly losing anywhere from 1/4 to 1 pound per week of body weight. And so this could be definitely a very slow and steady course that you can reach the goal that you are. So if you're within 3 to 5% of your race weight, it's likely the first couple steps, 1 through 3, can definitely get you there. I'm going to go through all 14 because they're actually pretty interesting to give us some perspective of the different things that we've got going on. Excellent. All right, so let's get started. So the first thing is to eliminate things like processed sodas, sweet teas, things that have excess sugar. So that's really the basis of the first one. To get rid of things like that. Sodas, teas, high sugar drinks, even those non-calorie options can definitely wreak havoc on your body. So finding substitutions for those, whether it be sparkling waters or splitting it with just regular water, or just getting more water in overall, can definitely make a difference. So next thing is to eliminate alcohol. Looking at candy, cakes, chips, sweets, essentially extra carbohydrate stores that you could easily get away with during your in-season, but during the off-season can be very, very difficult, because for a lot of athletes, this is their kind of their weakness, and they're able to enjoy those things. And you hear riders say, hey, the reason why I ride is so that I can eat, and that sort of thing. And that kind of mentality can be very, very difficult, especially as you move forward as an endurance athlete. Joking aside, it does allow some things during in-season, but off-season you could really make a difference. So maintaining this 300 to 500 calorie deficit per day could be really the where you want to be as far as being able to move the scale in the direction that you want if you're within those, like we were saying, 5% of your race weight. And so moving into kind of more deeper ways we can go is that you can fuel for your training sessions, just for your training sessions. So that means before, during, and after, that you are getting the fuel that you need. So if you're doing an intense ride on the bike, you're getting that fuel in, but the rest of the day you're focusing on things like high quality protein and vegetables to get those other sources in the rest of the day, and maybe not doing those carbohydrate refuelings all throughout the day versus that you would do with like a 2-day, a long big workout and race in the morning and then just fueling all day. So just fueling around your workout could be very, very useful. Reducing your carbohydrate use overall or over time throughout the day, so that when you're on a rest day, that you won't be taking in a huge amount of carbohydrates through the rest of the day, or just through the whole, since it is a rest day, since you're not on the bike, throughout the whole day. So having a decreased amount of that could be very, very useful as well. So these are the times where training in this glycogen depleted state has little impact on your fitness program, because there's not a whole lot of riding going on, and even if there is, the intensity should be lower, zone 2, some tempo work, things like that. We're not doing VO2 max anaerobic efforts at this time of the year. So really eating a light, low carbohydrate, high protein dinner before the evening before a rest day could be very useful, where when you were in season, what you would actually do is you would do the opposite and do a high carbohydrate meal so that you are fueled for, let's say, that morning session. So taking that into consideration is very, very important as well. So with that, moving forward, athletes who are already eating, on a whole food diet, non-packaged, nutrient dense, they need to start their journey now with portion control and making sure that even though you are getting good foods in and they are great, that you need to kind of look at what is the composure, what are they composed of, and drop down the things that you need. So if you're getting more things like proteins in, you can easily back off on the fats, you could easily back off on the carbohydrates, and it could be very, very useful in this situation. The next part is making sure you get sleep, so there's not as many training sessions back to back, and hopefully you're not leaving yourself completely exhausted. So what that will allow you to do, hopefully, is to be able to get a little bit more sleep, spend some time with your family, that sort of thing, and that's what can really make a difference in your recovery. Because sleep deprivation inhibits fat loss, also inhibits gains during your season. So sleep is important on both sides of the scale. Protein intake is the one thing that we find that typically riders are too low on. So it's important that you're not skimping out on that and making sure that you're maintaining the normal levels, even though that the calorie level might be a little bit lower. That you still keep those sources of protein in. So focusing on lean protein sources such as meat, fish, dairy is also a little controversial, but still can work in most plans if it does well. But again, it's meat, fish, seafood, and eggs are all really good sources of proteins daily to make sure you're getting your minimum amount and keeping that going. And a lot of times, use your own experience. If something works for you, then go with that. This is also a time to kind of experiment with what actually works with you or for you. So very important there. So loading up on vegetables by filling up half your plate or more at most meals. Fruits are definitely a healthy component as well in a weight loss plan and should be eaten in moderation. I mean, these are still better than those high sparking, high carbohydrate fuels that we mentioned at the beginning, kind of those fruits and the snacks and cakes and things like that. Fruits definitely provide the availability of good digestion of the carbohydrates that are accompanied with the fruits. So definitely a good source there. So don't limit yourself there as well. Utilizing a nutrient timing technique. So instead of a recovery drink right after training time, you can just make it so that you go to at the end of your, try to time your training session to end at a time where there's a meal, and eating one of your regular meals. Or if in fact the intensity wasn't very high on your workout, then you could easily just wait to have your next meal at the normal time. So before, when the intensity was very high, post-workout was very, very important. But as your intensity decreases during the off season, you should be able to just eat at your next meal, which could be very, very useful. And you're not getting those extra calories in. Let's say if you're doing a carbohydrate refuel right afterwards. So definitely could be to your advantage. And the other thing is to limit grazing and focus on the meals. So if you've got your 3 square meals, you've got meals during the day, not saying that they should be at set times, but saying that they should be times where you can kind of look forward to enjoying a meal, and just avoid snacking. Things like while watching TV, working on the internet, and just kind of mindlessly putting food in, just making sure you're not grazing throughout the day, but in fact focusing on the times of the meal. If you in fact are scheduling a time where you are you have a snack, then I think that's important, depending on your schedule, that and you can look forward to it. And I think that's great. And again, this goes back to planning and to kind of understanding, hey, this is what I'm looking forward to. This is what I'm trying to get out of this, and then you could say, this is my 4 meals, my 4 different things that I'm eating throughout the day. The other thing is to look into fasting. So definitely fasting overnight. So taking that time at your last meal, whether it be 8 or 9 o'clock, and putting yourself into a fast into the next morning, whether it be not eating for 12 hours, which most of us are able to easily do, or pushing that limit a little bit into the 14 hours or even to the 16 hours. And a lot of times that could be helpful, especially on a rest day, for example. A lot of times people will wake up and they'll be completely famine and want to put food in, and a lot of times it is habit, and sometimes people just put food in just because that's what they've always done. So if you could get those extra 4 hours, 2 hours, 4 hours of essentially overnight fat burning after you've reached that time where everything has been digested from the night before, it could be very, very useful. And then coming up to our last two tips is be careful of cheating. And the reason why is, people have cheat days. They'll knock you off your scales and things like that. And a lot of times you can get away with a whole lot more in season, but off season, because the intensity is so low, the effects are kind of a little bit more intensified on this end of things. So again, plan for it. If you know you're going to have a weekend deal and you've got a celebration, a social interaction, plan for that. And then know that that's what's going to happen on that day. But on the other days, know that you're going to stick to your plan. Just like you stick to your training plan from your coaches, you're going to do the same for the times that you are training through the week for your food as well. So taking this approach could be very, very useful in that. And then the last tip that we have here from our article is identifying times where you need to pack any unneeded calories as a habit. So let's say like you're watching television and you're finding yourself just mindlessly eating something and just not getting you into those situations. And I think more so I probably would find when rioters are, I would say, just not planning and for their food or their meal, and they end up a time where they're just way too hungry, and they essentially have waited too long for their meal. And so what happens is that you just want to eat everything in sight. You end up overeating because you've waited way too long in between the meals because of whatever has happened, whether it be work or family. So having those snacks on hand, ones that you've planned out, you're saying, hey, I'll feel good if I eat this sort of thing and it is in line with my goals, could be very, very important. So keeping those in mind. So our last two tips here towards the bottom here, if you measure it, you can change it. And so what I recommend, I think for at least for a short amount of time, is to get some sort of food diary app. You could do it as simple as a couple different ways. And a lot of times when I work with athletes, it's really as simple as sending me a photo of everything that you eat in a day for a week, and without changing anything, and let someone kind of take an outside view of how much you're looking at. Or you can take all those photos, put them in a folder at the end of the week, and look and see, did I make good choices through the whole week? Is this something that I want to continue? And that sort of thing. Good old pen and paper can work too. You can write it down, you could jot it down, with your phone on a little sheet there, but just getting some kind of log could be very useful. So going all the way to the full extent of logging it on something like MyFitnessPal could be very useful. It could be a rabbit hole for many. which essentially, can get you down and into, kind of the rabbit hole of like, is this a carb, a protein, or a fat? But I think the diary is made so that the purpose of it would be just to get an idea of what you're eating. And if, in fact, you went to the next level, it would be maybe to look at the macros of the thing. So you just want to measure a caloric intake for a couple of days. I'd say anywhere from 3 days to a week could be very useful. And learning the profile that you have can make it easier to make a dietary decision. So the other thing to track would be to track your body weight or fat percentage. I would prefer fat percentage. If you have a scale, definitely that. You could do easy as calipers as well. So those are the two ways that I have my athletes look at their body fat percentage. And that's the number that we want to kind of look at. And you can scale those and you can record those in programs like Training Peaks, MyFitnessPal, even Fitbit. If you have that, you can track those. And over time, you can see your changes. They're going to be slow going. It really depends on how quickly we're moving the scale, but definitely can be change over time. You want to graph this, and this is something that you can see your milestones and your goals achieved, and it could be very, very motivating. So definitely keep that in mind. So with that, we come up to our last bit here, is additional tips and tricks to staying on target. And that essentially is how do you get the motivation to keep yourself going? And so you could do a couple different things. Obviously, if you have a coach, you have someone to be accountable to. You could also join a challenge of sorts, and plenty of groups online have that, whether they be cycling related or nutrition related. They could all be in fun. So groups will often get together for either nutrition or weight loss challenge. One of the really popular ones that the article brings up, and I have some experience with, is the Whole30. Essentially, it is taking a whole food-based approach for 30 days. You share your goals, you share your recipes and excitement. And it's one thing we're thinking about putting together in the Endurance Lab as well, is just to be able to share your what you're eating during this time of the season, and just kind of get that information, or at least that support that other people are going through some of the same things and trying to get answers. So reading up on losing weight and essentially keeping your mind focused in these groups can be very, very useful. So just as really just like the rabbit hole we can jump into to learning how to do structured training and how to get fast on the bike. You could essentially go down this and try to like set your goals and putting up rewards for yourself for different goals achieved and that sort of thing. And that's where things could get really, really fun. So essentially, throwing out the junk foods in your fridge and things that you haven't eaten and you feel like you're just going to wait and hold on to. Keeping a smaller plate portion could be very useful as well. So, and the last couple things here is the use of what's called a glycogen depleted training session. And essentially that's a day, for example, let's say you've had your rest day, you came in fasted, you have a rest day. The next day, obviously, you're not eating a whole lot of carbohydrates and you've got your next workout. Let's say it's a zone 2 workout, once or twice a week, doing anywhere from a 30 to a 16-minute aerobic training session in zone 2 or a low heart rate. In this fasted state, first thing in the morning could be very useful. But one thing is important, make sure you fuel after this. That way you've got some food in there. You've probably gone, if in fact you were a rest day before, you've gone a long time without food. So making sure you get that food in afterward is really, really important. So there's no doubt that getting down to a race weight is important. It's challenging. It does require some sacrifice, especially if you are trying to reach a number that is a big jump for you for the next season. But you just definitely, just like we do on the bike, embrace the hard work, earn your rewards, and it'll essentially put you, where you want to be, and have you reach your goals. And so with that, kind of just a big overview. You just want to make sure that you're making good choices, eating whole foods, and go back and hit those 14 points that we talked about today. I'll post a link to the blog article here that we talked about. But really, this is the time. Everyone, coaches, everyone talks about this isn't part of the season where we should be doing XYZ. This is the time of the season where you can reach your both your strength goals off the bike, as well as your weight goals if you in fact have those. This is the time to do it. It's not in season where you're trying to build your FTP, you're trying to get your anaerobic powers up, your VO2 max powers up. That's not the time. This is the time. If you want more information about this, the Endurance Lab is actually doing a great job at making this happen. So check out the Endurance Lab at endurancelab.fit. If you are a current lab writer and you have any questions about this, definitely put up some posts. We are here to help. The coaches are here to help. We've got 5 coaches in the group. We've got a nutrition consultant that is there on board with us. So as well, great resource, and all of us there to help you. So check out endurancelab.fit. Check out the podcast at The Endurance Lab on your favorite podcast app. And thank you for everyone who joined us here on Zwift Live by ODZ and all our partner channels. I want to thank you for that. And everyone here on the ride, thanks for joining in. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for staying with the Beacon. And I will see you guys next week in the Feed Zone.